I'm going to talk about a bit more about the industry and procurement, digital software technology, and just how that helps a greener future for everyone. And really, I've been speaking to a lot of businesses today about collaboration. And hi, come on in. Come on in. I've literally just started, so just you just missed my name, but I'm Max Kent. Oh, don't worry, it's fine. Yeah, no, more the merrier, obviously. Yeah, just talking about in general collaboration. I've said to a lot of people, wouldn't it be nice if all of those software technologies in that room start working with more and more businesses and start helping people, regardless of whether it's Compleat or another company. I don't really see them as competitors. We're all trying to do the same thing. And if that works, then it will help businesses, it will save resource, it will save cost. So it's just worth us all thinking like that. I think that's the way we need to work. Oh, yeah. So when I'm talking about greener, it's key to outline that. I mean, that's talking about all aspects of ESG, but in particular, I want to talk about carbon emission tracking in this particular session. So there's other parts of that around integrated online buying that will come to as well, and some of those technologies will help drive procurement and sustainable procurement strategies. So I'll go a bit further into that as well. But first of all, really talking about carbon emission. Hi there. Carbon emission tracking and how that all fits together. So have a quick look at the agenda of today's session. What does carbon and net zero have to do with procurement? Then SECR reporting. I just want to get into a little bit more detail about that and how we work with that, supply chain emissions tracking and scope 3. And then some of those advanced digital procurement integrating online buying solutions that also help save resource along with cost. So firstly, when we think about organisations and what they do and how they operate, and we apply that same logic to our customers and our suppliers and partners, service providers, and pretty much anything we need in our daily lives, we get the ability to view things at either a sort of macro, large-scale level or a micro level, like we're seeing here. So where you go into all the different areas in an organisation, how you think about all of these might be made more efficient, you start to get to an understanding of the scale of the problem of trying to calculate this stuff and how procurement has a part to play in it. So when we look at efficiency, even just in procurement terms, let alone business terms, that could mean a whole variety of different measures. But in this context, again, it's just purely how much carbon each activity is undertaken within a business and the sum total of that within all of those activities, how that's measured and how each of those activities could be made more efficient. So I think this picture illustrates that perfectly, really. And when you apply that to a multi-site business or large-scale organisations, you just start to get an understanding of what a nightmare this is to try and work this all out. That's compounded by SECR reporting. So the government brought this in 2019. It kind of came in under the radar and it's starting to ramp up now. So it started off where it affects all listed companies plus any large organisation by definition that has a turnover of 36 million or more, a balance sheet of total of 18 million or more than 250 employees. It includes charities, LLPs and other non-profits as well. At the moment, what must be disclosed is all greenhouse gas emissions under the first 2 scopes, but scope 3 will be coming in soon. There isn't any penalties for not filing the reporting as yet, but you know how this stuff goes. They're going to bring more and more in and tighten the net, especially when we start to look at where all the emissions are within an organisation. So you must disclose relevant ratios of emissions factors, and we call that the intensity ratio. So all businesses in the UK are now being measured against an intensity ratio, which is calculated basically number of CO2 emissions against each pound or dollar sold within your business. So that shows the energy efficiency action within a reporting period, but it gives you all the metrics. So every business in the UK has what we call an intensity ratio. When we collect energy usage data, that means meter data. It also means invoices from suppliers and annual statements from suppliers. And again, that's why digital procurement and procurement starts to have a role to play in this. So if we look at these 3 scopes on here, we've got direct emissions in scope 1. So that's your expenses, your fuel usage, your car travel, that sort of thing. So let's change to electric vehicles, that kind of thing. Great, that's going to save you maybe 5% of your total emissions if you're lucky. You've then got your indirect emissions, so basically that's your utilities, your your energy, your heating, your light. So let's change to solar power, let's change the light bulbs, things like that. It's probably another 5% of total carbon emission savings. Scope 3, and you've probably seen a lot on this, if you don't know what Scope 3 is already, just to reiterate, that's all of your third-party supply chain emissions, which actually plays into your company's total emissions and affects your intensity ratio for your organisation. And we see in the data, and we'll illustrate this with a live example in a minute, that up to 90% of company emissions are within Scope 3. So that's the third parties you're working with. They're the ones that are causing the largest impact on your organisation. So let's have a little bit more of a look at that. So 70-90% produced by Scope 3. That means that for all the work you're doing, the biggest volumes are created by your third-party supply chain. So that means procurement, the data that's held in procurement becomes far more relevant, plus the relationships you've got with your suppliers, because it's all about how you work with them to reduce those emissions ratios and drive down your own emissions at the same time. So we'll focus on Scope 3 more in this session. Reporting on Scope 3 basically means that a business must be able to find expenditure data down to supplier and ideally product line level to work with each of those carbon calculations in each category of supplier, and that's really where these kind of technologies come into play. So there'll be more of this stuff coming out from a lot of the organisations, I'm sure, in the business, in our industry, and certainly we're looking at that as an organisation as well. So back to my point at the start, actually, if we're looking at saving the planet with this kind of stuff, it doesn't really matter whether it's us or someone else. I just hope that all businesses are going to start doing this kind of reporting. It gives procurement a completely different thing to look at, away from cost saving and supplier relationship management and those kind of the good things that we've always been involved in, and now we've got a different driver. So certainly for me, it's a great thing to be involved in. Again, consequences of late filing of SECR reporting. We're seeing it can also result in companies' accounts not being signed off and potentially further civil penalties. So you can't ignore it. But Scope 3, if you want to get to net zero, it's the same calculations. So if you've pledged as a business you want to reduce your carbon emissions, you need the same data to actually do it. So more and more organisations are starting to look at how this is calculated and how we work on it. Please jump in at any point if you want to ask any questions at any stage. So let's talk a little bit further about intensity ratios. What is an intensity metric or ratio? Well, that's the measure of total carbon emissions. It's the most widely used metric. It's still a bit finger in the air. Everyone's still trying to get to the right kind of way of working this out. There's businesses looking at global standards. There's a Harvard Business report that's just come out about a centrally managed database of global emissions ratings for every single business in the world. That's the way the world wants to go. Wouldn't that be great? I think that's going to take many years to get to that stage. So right now, if we need to work out where our emissions are, well, this is about as good as it gets. So again, calculating those intensity ratios, every gram of CO2 emission against each pound or dollar of gross merchandise sales is how it's calculated at the moment. So if you're in an organisation, the first thing you're going to think is, well, how do I work out my intensity ratio? And that's really where it gets tricky. So you've got those three scopes to work out. You've got the 90% in the supply chain. If you look at the government website on how to report on this stuff, basically what they say is you should have all this stuff on your invoices already. You should know this from your suppliers. So great. If you've got an AP automation tool in place, something that's extracting the data from invoices, that's good, you've got that data already. You've probably got some sort of source. But even then, we start to look at technology like OCR. That data's not going to be as accurate. It depends on how good quality that particular supplier's invoice is when it comes into the system. Certainly, we extract all that data at line level, but even then, certain invoices will turn up and people think in the AP department they're doing you a favour by screwing it into a ball and scribbling all over before they put it into the system. That's just not going to go through. So manual intervention then comes into play. Either way, we need all of that data to come into a centralised database to be able to report on. Just a little bit on the cycle of sustainable procurement and how that works with technology. So I think it's good to go through the whole cycle of this and how this all fits together. So when we look at AP automation, purchasing automation, the first bit from our point of view is just getting the invoices captured. So from the starting point number one, this is our end users selecting on where they buy something from. So we're going to go into our purchasing tool, we're going to select suppliers from a list, basically. It may be pulled from the finance system, it may be what procurement has specified we can select from as an end user. Once that transaction's happened, we need the invoice to come into the system to be digitally matched to the transaction, so there's no manual intervention needed in AP, but crucially we're going to extract all that data from it. We're going to push that into our spend analytics, so we've got line level reporting information and all supplier transactions, and then that feeds the digital procurement tools, whether it's our system or someone else's. It should feed things like source to pay, product sourcing, supplier relationship management, contract management. Without that data source, you've got a great system without anything really to feed into it. So it has to feed itself. Once we've got this system in place, we've then got better informed decisions and better control on the suppliers we're using. So we're back to starting point again, but with a more controlled way of doing it, with better suppliers, things like punch out, punch in. So we've got a better controlled way of interacting with the key preferred suppliers that procurement want the end users to buy from, with approvals and things like that built in. And then the cycle continues and it starts to refine itself. But without all of those things in place, it's not going to work. So the next 3 slides, I'm going to get further into carbon tracking in particular. So this is a bit of a special overview. We've just got the first 2 clients working with this. So this is a live client data, obviously anonymised to protect the innocent, but what we're showing here is live data that they're actually using. This is a 35-site care home group. They've used our Compleat system for about the last 5 years. They use the spend analytics tools, but they've just plugged in the carbon tracking. So this is £55 million of their spend going through the tool since 2018. You can see we've captured 61,000 invoices for them at line level detail. And when we get each invoice, we categorise it to standard procurement expenditure categories. We can also do it by nominal coding, depending on how they want to quantify things. But what it does is go down to supplier and product level. We then have the intensity ratio. We have a carbon tracking team within Compleat who have data science and carbon experience. So they've got intensity ratios that are centrally held, and that applies and multiplies against the spend data within our system. So we can see the exact carbon impact of every single purchase they make. So within here, you see they spent 55 million. We can see that that produced 23,000 tonnes of CO2. And that starts to play towards that SECR reporting against. And all we get at the moment is SECR reporting's coming in, or I've been asked to provide this data, or we're trying to get to net zero. I've got no idea how to calculate it. I think we've done the right things, but when I look at my suppliers, I don't know how to get to it. This is just, we haven't doctored this at all. This is just literally a screenshot of their data, and we can see that nearly 90% of their emissions are in scope 3. So it says it all. I'm going to go further into it, the report, so you can see how this plays out when it's categorised. So we can see emissions per procurement category here, and in construction we've got a large amount of suppliers, nearly 5,000 tonnes of CO2 produced on 11 million spend. Energy and utilities is high as well, but we can start to look at key areas where we could actually do something about this. So yes, SECR reporting, it's mandatory and it will become more so, and we've got to provide this data, but actually this is about solutions and what we actually do with the data to drive our own emissions down. So you start to get the understanding of actually this is about collaborating with our suppliers and working with them to drive their own emissions ratios down, because that affects us as an organisation. This is highlighted more when we actually get to supplier level. So when you look at that big emissions total, that gets broken down actually into the suppliers themselves. So construction we saw was higher, there was a big spend, 7.2 million, they're obviously building probably new care home sites. That produces carbon probably every time they're pouring cement out and everything else. But it's producing 2.6 thousand tonnes of CO2 in that activity. Now, Dealey Construction may well challenge the intensity ratio that's held for them. We can update that, and it's updated anyway centrally on a monthly basis, and it's a key point because you could get a specialist in to look at this stuff and look at your supply chain and review where you're at. That's going to give you a snapshot in time. What happens next month and the month after that when you've worked with those suppliers to reduce their own emissions, you're driving down your supply chain emissions, how do you review it again and again to show how the trend is reducing? and keep reporting on it. Well, at the moment, you're going to have to pay a carbon specialist to keep doing that for you. And it's into that sort of consultancy charge of, well, we hope we're going to get the right number out of this work. This is actually showing it in real time. So we need this stuff in spend analytics, and that's how procurement really have a part to play in this, because this is all about supplier relationships. So these guys are actually speaking to their suppliers now. They've got a hit list that they're working through, and we're seeing more and more of our customers working through this hit list to actually drive down their Scope 3 emissions by engaging with their own supply chain. And if you get that logic, then that's all about collaboration with every business working together to drive down everyone else's emissions ratios. So it's all about that collaboration piece, and this is the first time we've really been able to show this sort of data. I'm nearing the end of the presentation. I'm going to move on to integrated buying solutions and just show a bit about how that affects things. But any questions on this before I move on at all? Are you guys kind of being faced with reporting on this sort of stuff at all? Have you been told you need to yet?
We have to, yes. One of our biggest clients is the Environment Agency, so we have to report.
Yeah. We've had quite a few projects on this where customers have approached us to say, can you do anything with it? So this is a key thing for us, but I think it's just going to become more and more prevalent. And if you've got customers that have sort of almost bypassed the rest of our system and going, can we just have this bit? We're a large organisation, we've already got a purchasing system in place, but can we just have this? And absolutely yes. It's we don't have to plug the whole of Compleat into a software. We can just feed off the invoices and report on this data, because we know how it goes. If you start looking at this stuff on the whole, and then you want to do a system review and you start looking at integrations and consultancy, changing systems, you could be 2 years down the line before you get anywhere near this sort of stuff. Really, we just want you to have this now so you can see where you're at and start driving all the emissions down with every single supplier. So do come and speak to me more about this if you want to know more about it. You want a full demo of the system, we're delighted to do that. The last part I want to move on to is punch-in. Now, the first integration we've got is with Amazon Business. But the key point to make is that this works with any supplier who has an online ordering website. The point of showing this is that traditionally with systems where you have a supplier integration, so do you all know Punch-Out, how that works at all? Okay, so Punch-Out is quite an old technology. What that is I go into my purchasing system, I load up a purchase order requisition form, and I want to buy from a supplier. Normally, I'd just go to their website and select the items and just write all that into a purchase order. The problem with that is if I want 5 different things, I might just go stationery order, 250 quid, raise the purchase order, and great, it's coded and it's to the right place. That's no good for procurement. We want all the data, we want all the lines, we want to know exactly what was purchased, the price paid, so we can do the spend analysis on it and really work out how we can save money on every single product. This does all of that. But if you want every end user in your organisation to purchase through the system, you're going to have to buy a license for each one of those to access a purchasing system, whether it's ours or someone else. Now, on our largest system, if you want every single user to have a license, they could be 150, 200 quid per user per year. And those guys might only place an order once a year. So actually, that's a cost that you don't really want to have. So with Punch-In, what this does, and you'll see it in the demo in a minute, they don't have to have a license to our software. They literally just go to the website they want to buy from. As long as it's integrated with our system, as long as that organisation has a license to us somewhere, they can just punch the order into our system. So it goes into the purchase order and it's raised. So procurement and finance have got the bits they need, the procurement trail, the paper trail and all that bit, all the data, but that person hasn't had to spend on a license. So you could save thousands and thousands a year by using this technology. Gets everyone in the business buying correctly through the right systems. I mean, Punch-Out is worth having because you would raise the order and go straight to that supplier's website. So you've got that ordering experience that they've spent millions on. You've got the right products, that can all be controlled, but you are integrating it through your system. So you're not just letting your end users go to any website and buy whatever they like. It has to be controlled through the system, but you don't have to pay for that license cost for all of it. So let's just show you the video of how that works. Might take a few seconds to load up. And then you'll get just a little bit of an idea of how this fits together. So I'll just talk you through what's happening here. So what an end user is going to do, and imagine this is Amazon Business, but it could be any online ordering website, as I said. It just needs that link to ours. So they just want to order something from Amazon Business. They're just going to go to that website. It's already got the integration, so they've got that somewhere in their system. But this person placing this order doesn't use Compleat Software, hasn't logged in, doesn't need to pay for that license cost. So they're just going on and using Amazon like anyone else would to place an order. So they find their products, put it in the shopping basket, check that they've got the right things. All of this stuff can be restricted depending on what the account is with Amazon or anyone else. So if you've got a deal with Amazon where they're not showing you 5 million products, they're showing you 100 products because that's the only ones you want to buy. So they've got guided buying where they can control their website. You still get access to all those controls. So it's not a free-for-all for all your end users. Same normal stuff that you all know when you order from Amazon. Punch out is active, so you just select the right controls on here. And then when you submit the order for approval, this is when it sends all that data to the purchasing system. So from a finance and procurement point of view, we've got what we wanted. We've got our data, we've got our paper trail, we've got the correct purchase order. The end user just needs to do the final parts of this, so they just need to make sure it's coded correctly. They've got their justification for sign-off of the order. So it goes through the approval chains, line management and budget holder approval can be done through this, so they can all have the right checks and balances in place to make sure that this product can be ordered and coded correctly to the right budget. So all of that good stuff is in there. But again, there's no cost to that end user for actually doing this. It's just that it goes through the right system. We work with a lot of multi-academy trusts and schools, and that's exactly what they need, because they've got probably hundreds of different departments placing orders, and one of these, they may want to place an order once a year for this sort of stuff, and not go on again, but they need to access it and go through the system in the right way. So what it's done is pulled that whole Amazon order into the system and placed it in the right way. That person's had nothing to do with the order from that point. And as I said, that works with every single supplier that has an online ordering site. And really, that's the end of the presentation. If anyone's got any questions, happy to answer it, happy to provide demos. Come and speak to me afterwards. But thank you very much otherwise.
Thank you.